Good morning and thank you for tuning in today. You are watching The Dietitian on a Mission. Janet Calderwood, that's me. I am the dietitian on a mission, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. I am dedicated to providing you up-to-date, practical tips to help you live better with remembering that nutrition is a science. And you know, I say this often, but I really want people to have the right information. And so I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be with me. And I have another person that I like to thank for being here too, and that's Jerica Coley. And she's a registered dietitian that I have the privilege of knowing. I want to thank you for being here too, Jerica.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you in the studio. You know, she's actually a basketball player from FIU when she went there, and just really a great dietitian, and so it's just wonderful to be able to pick your brain today. We're going to talk about something, you know, we live in Southwest Florida, it gets really hot down here, and as these temperatures rise on the outside, we realize how important it is to stay hydrated, to keep our internal temperature cool, right? So refreshing things that can keep people in Southwest Florida, and actually in any climate, refresh and keep your body temperature regulated. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to start out with, I think, maybe addressing some things about hydration. Don't you think that's a good place to start?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so hydration, when we think about how much our bodies need. Our bodies are what, 45 to 75% water?
Great. And like you mentioned, how much we really need. So typically, like women, like us adult women over 19, we typically need about, well, usually it's more than about 2.7 liters, which is about 11 cups.
11 cups, if you're not a metric system person. 11 cups, so that's for a woman.
Correct.
What about for a guy?
For a guy, it's about 3.7 liters, which is about 15 cups.
15 cups. See, she's doing the math for us, so if you don't have that metric conversion scale. So you know, we used to think years and years ago, people were told, oh, you need 8 16-ounce glasses of water a day, or you're just dehydrated, right? But we know that that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, we need a little bit more than that, and you know, depending on where you live, what you do every day, and really like what food you eat, because 20% of our fluid intake comes from food as well. So
so food and fluids, they're both important. They provide, you know, the hydration that your body needs, which is so important, I think, in regulating your body temperature, especially not necessarily just in hot climates, but any climate where there is extreme temperature changes, right?
Correct.
And then, you know, when I think about how much of our body is actually water, it's like 10 to 12 gallons. You're walking around with 10 to 12 gallons of all kinds of fluids in your body. Did you know that? That's a lot of fluid, isn't it?
It is.
All right, now Jerica, we were talking briefly about maybe sometimes people don't realize that they're at great risk for dehydration, especially in Southwest Florida, if they're not properly hydrating, right? And different things like that, and getting some of their fluids from their foods. What are some of the signs and symptoms that people can look for as kind of a measuring stick, if you will, what happens if they lose too much fluids?
Right, so some of the general signs and symptoms of dehydration could include a dry mouth, dry skin in general, maybe decreased urine output or no urine output, or even having a darker colored urine. That's an easy way to tell if you're kind of dehydrated.
Okay.
Maybe dizziness, headaches, being extremely fatigued. Those are some general symptoms you can look at.
Okay, and some of those, of course, would be symptoms for other things too, but I think what you brought up was really an interesting point, mentioning that you know, the color of the urine, because you and I as dietitians, we understand that certainly that the color of urine can play a role in helping guide us to know if we're adequately hydrated, right? If your urine color is a pale color, for example, or straw color, that can be indicative that you're at least achieving a normal hydration pattern. If it's, like Jerica said, if it's really concentrated, now let me say something, because sometimes people, what do? They take a vitamin pill.
Oh, right.
Right, first thing in the morning. And so if you're taking a vitamin pill first thing in the morning, well, yeah, it's possible your urine's going to be bright yellow, right? But that aside, and then also pointing out that people that have liver conditions can sometimes have abnormal color urine. But generally speaking, if it's clear or if it's a light pale color, that you're probably adequately hydrated. But don't always go by that, and you can't always go by your thirst, can you?
Nope, because typically when you are thirsty, it's a little bit too late. You're already dehydrated.
So, I mean, if you are already thirsty, then you probably weren't drinking when you should have been.
Right.
Okay.
And older adults, they actually have a decreased kind of like thirst sensation.
Okay.
So they might not really realize it till even much later. So.
Wow. And, and like, for example, one other thing that's really important to point out is that with fluids and different foods that we eat, you know how I said that our body is really like 10 to 12 gallons of water, but you lose about 2.5 quarts of fluids a day, or 10 cups through urination, through perspiration, through sitting, through breathing and bowel movements. So all kinds of our necessary functions. So we've got to replete those every day. And like Jerica said, sometimes these symptoms of dehydration, they may appear mild, but they can certainly get more and more serious as the days go by, correct?
Correct.
So, and especially for small children or people that don't have a lot of weight, right? Smaller bodies. I mean, that's why sometimes even losing fluid losses through diarrhea or whatever with a small child, that it's more of an eminent need to get the person to see someone or, replenish those fluids. Okay, so that helps us understand a little bit about dehydration. And of course, there are some times when people need more fluids, more than normal. I mean, we talked about, the guys needing, you said 3.8 liters a day, and the women, what was that amount again?
2.7.
Okay,
liters.
2.7. So, and those are a guideline, right? So, what times, let's talk about, you were an athlete, right? You were a basketball star. Tell me a little bit about, and as I understand it, as you explained it to me, that they did kind of let you, being the dietetic intern when you were in school, also be like the dietitian for the team, right?
Right.
You had
Let me do that.
You had a double meaning, right? Okay, so what kind of advice did you give to the athletes, the people that were, on the field, and did you have any general guidelines? Because the interesting thing that I read was that if you have somebody that's an athlete, like a guy that's 150 pounds, he can lose up to 1.5 quarts or 3 pounds in just 1 hour if he's playing, right? That's like 6 8-ounce glasses of fluids.
Right.
So tell me, Jerica, what advice did you give to people, or what was your recommendations?
Well, typically I would tell them to try to start hydrating before any exercise or competition. So usually at least an hour to 2 hours before, at least try to get in, at the very least, 16 ounces, 2 cups before your practice or competition. And then once we actually started the games or our practice, then we had to make sure that we continually hydrated throughout the practice. So every 10 to 15 minutes, or every time we had a timeout or a break or a halftime, that you make sure that you can drink at least 8 ounces or 1 cup every 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
And then if the competition lasted for at least an hour or more than an hour, then that would be the perfect time where we could drink like our Gatorades or any other, we had Gatorade, but any other
Okay.
sports electrolyte filled
Okay.
drink.
Does everybody need Gatorade?
No, everybody doesn't need Gatorade. Gatorade is mostly for like athletes, or if you're working out and you're losing sweat and you've worked out for a long period of time, at least an hour.
Okay.
So,
So what is it about Gatorade that makes Gatorade the sports drink?
well, so when you work out for so long, you sweat a lot and you lose some of your electrolytes, so like your sodium and potassium.
Okay.
So that's what Gatorade and other fitness drinks like Powerade and things like that puts back in, as well as they try to give you some extra energy, so they typically have a few more calories and grams of sugar, so that's what
And
makes it.
some of them have a lot, actually. I mean, I know what. So what you're saying is not everybody needs Gatorade. Not
Right.
everybody needs these drinks unless they're going to be sweating up a storm, and they need to. I guess the big thing is to replete those lost electrolytes, the potassium and the sodium, but it doesn't have to come through that. Actually, it could be from a food source, right? I know
Correct.
one. When I watch the tennis matches, the guy, he's always sitting there eating a banana on the sideline, drinking his water and everything. So there are other ways, but I mean, that's a convenient thing, right?
Right.
Okay, and then especially one thing that's important that you mentioned was that, of course, the more things that they're adding to these drinks, not always necessarily good for us, right? Especially for, the more sugars and a lot of these things. Water is still the best hydrator, right?
Right. It has 0
Okay.
calories, but it has all the fluids that you need. So.
So only for like athletes that are just going on and on and on, they may need a little bit of that electrolyte repletion. It sounds
Exactly.
like. Okay. Now you talked about how much fluids we're losing. You said that athletes typically need more, and it sounds like it's important to prior to the activity, during the activity, and even after the activity,
Right.
that they're replacing all of these lost fluids.
Correct. And so like afterwards, like a rule of thumb at least that I told them, and kind of like a recommendation, was that at least if you know how much you weigh, or you can weigh yourself before practice or competition. So kind of like the example you mentioned before. So for every pound that you lose after the exercise is usually water weight. So for every pound you lose, you drink another 16 ounces, maybe 2 cups. So
Okay, to make up for the lost fluids.
Fluids, yeah.
Okay. Now, when you are picking, so if we're talking to people and they're out in Southwest Florida or wherever they are and it's really hot, what are some beverages that you think would be appropriate for people? We talked about, of course, the sports beverage for people that are, exercising for long periods of time. What are some other beverage choices?
some other choices that are low in calories, low in sugar, are iced teas are typically lower in calories. especially
Unsweetened iced tea?
Unsweetened, right.
Uh-huh.
Especially if
Okay.
you make your own. And
Okay.
club sodas or the sparkling waters, they typically have no calories, so that's a pretty good option. Or even if you kind of like, if you made your own, we were talking about some to try to get kids involved in drinking water. You can buy or use those ice cube molds and fill it with even their favorite juice and put a couple of those ice cubes in water, and that might
Yeah.
entice
So
them to
it's
drink a little
almost
bit more
like
water.
a flavored water
Right.
with 2 juice cubes in there. What recommendations do you have to parents that like to give their kids a lot of juice?
Well, the recommendation is that you only have 4 ounces of juice, a day for kids. And so,
And comes from the American Academy of Pediatrics, not from her. I'm just kidding. No, from her too.
no,
Okay,
no, it's from
Jerica.
them. So,
So 4 ounces a day of juice, and primarily
juice.
for kids, right?
for kids, correct.
And I mean, because the more you give them, and even adults, really. I mean, I don't want people getting all their calories from their beverages.
Correct.
And you know, when you think about it, that's a great opportunity for people that are trying to lose weight. If they're drinking a lot of fluids that provide a lot of calories, like a lot of juice, even though we know, right, juice can be healthy, right, 100% vitamin C juices. But remember also that you're getting sometimes the calories that you probably don't need, that you could still drink a glass of water. It would be better, you could still be refreshed with a piece of fruit,
Correct.
right? A nice cold piece of fruit in the refrigerator, that would satisfy you, or some frozen grapes. How about that? But the bottom line is, with the beverages, we want to be mindful that they can have a lot of calories.
Right.
So limiting the juice, you know, nowadays it gets confusing because you see fruit drinks, you see juice, and then you see juice drinks. And the question is, they're not all created equal. For it to be called juice, it has to be 100% juice. Fruit drinks may have some fruit flavors added, and then juice drinks have some juice added. And sometimes what they'll do is manufacturers will add vitamins and things back in it. But just remember, some of these drinks that we're giving our children do have a lot of calories, a lot of sugar, and there are better choices. Water will always be the best hydrator. And the challenge is trying to figure out ways to get people to enjoy more of it. Plain water may not appeal to people, but even you and I talked about adding different things into the water can be quite refreshing.
Right.
Like lemons and limes
Other
and
chunks of fruit.
chunks of fruit, anything, right? I've even seen cucumbers.
Yeah, true.
Have you seen cucumbers
Yes,
added?
especially in those fancy bottles where you can put the fruit like in the bottom and whatever.
There's all
that's supposed to
kinds of
be.
things you can do. There's definitely just different strategies, and you can try them. I'll tell you something, when you're really thirsty, it tastes really good, right? If you're really, really thirsty, especially if you're outside and then somebody brings you a nice glass of a flavored water with lemons or something, that's the way to go. But, you know, another thing that you mentioned, I'm kind of shifting gears back and forth here, but you mentioned that, oh, see, now I can't remember. I wonder if I'm dehydrated. See, about how in our elderly population, how they sort of don't have that thirst sensation anymore.
Right.
That's just part of the aging process, right?
Right. So they just have to
What
make
do
a
you
more
do?
concerted effort.
What do they do? What do you tell them to do?
Well, I just tell them to kind of make a more concerted effort. If they need to have more of a schedule to drink, to make sure that they drink, then they can do that, you know.
Like
drink.
maybe they could get one of those hooks that they hook
They
onto
use for
their
your
belt.
keys.
They have those things, right? You hook it onto your belt loop, or if you have like a special side table in your house, you know, or if you're sitting and reading a book, always have like maybe a big water bottle or something with you to sip on, right? And then I think if you have something with you often, that will help remind you, right? Oh, I need to be drinking this. I have it with me. Don't forget it at the gym if you go. And then the other thing is, if you pass a water fountain, if you're somewhere in public and you passed a water fountain, that should be a reminder. Oh, yeah, maybe I'll go take a drink from the water fountain. So let those be cues to you, okay? So that you can, if you're not feeling thirsty very much, to remind you to drink. Okay. So we've got the flavored waters. What are your thoughts on regular soft drinks? Do those hydrate very well?
Well, regular soft drinks, I would just put that on the list of things to not drink so often.
Okay.
But I mean, they typically have a lot of sugar, way more than what's recommended. And but extra carbonation is just kind of like unnecessary. But
Okay, so let's talk about this a minute, because you brought up a good point. You said I like how she puts it. She's so politically correct, isn't she? About, regular soft drinks having unnecessary things in them like sugar. Well, the American Heart Association recommends no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugars for women and 9 teaspoons for men. Well, listen, if you just have one regular soft drink a day, I can tell you something. You've already exceeded the daily limit of your added sugar content, because, for example, even something like a Mountain Dew, and there's a lot of people that like that, has, I can't even remember, but it's like 46 divided 4. It has like 12, you'll have to, something over 10 teaspoons of sugar. That's significant. That's like just eating 10 teaspoons of sugar. So that's one of the reasons why we don't recommend that. I'm not against anything like that, but if I know that it's not contributing to good health for you and it's a significant source of calories and sugar, there's better choices. And even if people, just start looking at their beverages and find better, healthier choices, they could probably start losing weight.
Correct. They just kind of focus on reading the label. They'll be surprised at how much sugar, how many grams of sugar is in each thing. And
sometimes you have these bottles, right? They're not necessarily, when we think about what a serving is, you're drinking the whole bottle, and there's enough in there for 2.5 servings. So if that's the case, that means that you have to multiply the calories for the 1 serving times 2.5 to give you the total number of calories. So if you're drinking the whole thing, that's what you have to do, okay? So that could be an eye-opener too, right? All right, now we talked about different beverages that people can drink, and also along the lines with the soft drinks, let's talk a little bit about energy drinks, right?
Right.
Energy drinks like Red Bull and things like that.
Yep, they also contain a ton of sugar as well, and even a lot of caffeine. I know the recommended upper limit for caffeine per day is about 400 milligrams in total caffeine, and those things have, I don't really know, a lot.
They have a significant amount. An average cup of coffee or something like that has 100. So, like Jerica said, usually moderate caffeine intake is about 300 to 400 milligrams per day. Well, if you're drinking, coffee and then you're drinking iced tea, there are opportunities to get plenty of caffeine in your day. And some people are sensitive to caffeine, even a little bit. So you've got to know what you can do. If you're drinking all this caffeine before you go to bed, don't be surprised if you have a hard time sleeping, if you're sensitive to caffeine. Sometimes I'll have, believe it or not, a cup of coffee right before I go to bed. I have no problem sleeping, but it just depends on the person, right? So, and we know that, a lot of people used to think, oh, no, for you to get your fluid needs, you have to drink water, and that's not necessarily the case, is it, Jerica?
Nope.
When we talk about the 3.8 liters or the 2.7 liters for women of fluids, we're talking about total fluids. Excluding alcoholic beverages. I'm not going to promote those or anything, but you can get those. Most of these beverages we're talking are significantly water, even things like milk.
Correct.
And so low-fat milk and things like that can also be good options, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Now, one of the things I wanted to do, so I wanted to give you guys some ideas of what you can do to stay cool during the hot temperatures that are outside, and I thought something that we could just briefly talk about would be like ice cream and popsicles and things like that, because those can provide an amount for our fluid needs too, but you got to be careful with these kind of things, right? Because the calories and the sugar can add up. So Jerica's going to tell us, what do you recommend when it comes to ice creams and things like that?
Well, as far as ice creams and frozen yogurts, for one, the recommended portion is a half a cup.
Half a cup. That's, if you've ever seen a tennis ball, a half a cup is about a half a tennis ball.
And so you want to make sure you read the label and try not to choose an option that has more than, you want it to have less than 150 calories. It should have no more than 5 grams of sugar, unless, like, some of them have like whole chunks of fruit in it, so sometimes that can be a little bit more.
Okay,
'cause
we'll
it's
give
hard
it to you
tell.
if it has chunks of fruit, because sometimes they'll put that as the sugar, okay? But what else?
And
Fat.
no more than 2.5 grams of saturated fat.
Okay.
And you
Now,
want it to, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say you just want it to make sure it has like a good amount of protein and calcium. Usually it'll have calcium in there, about 10 to 20% of the daily needs. That's a good number to look at. But
And usually, I think the frozen yogurts have probably more of the protein, like you're talking about. The thing that is really important is if you go and you're looking for things like Haagen-Dazs or premium ice creams like Ben & Jerry, I can tell you right now that you are not going to find 150 calories in a half a cup serving. It won't happen, because a serving, you start looking at the labels, you're going to be shocked. And the reality is, I don't know a lot of people that just eat a half a cup of anything, really. Half a cup of ice cream. So if you're going to do it, I usually even tell people a better strategy, if you're going to enjoy something like a frozen dessert or something, maybe consider some of the ones that are on the sticks. Right? Now tell us about those. What did you find about?
So they have some good options on the stick. They're called like fruited popsicles or some of those.
Fruit bars and
fruit
things.
bars, right.
Okay.
And they have mostly like good chunks of fruit inside of them with some other lower in sugar fruit juice, and those are some pretty good options. And
Okay, how many calories do you think we should aim for on those?
probably about, it's just fruit, probably about the same, less than 100 calories.
Yeah, depending on what it is. I mean, you can find some of those fruit bars probably 60 calories. Here's the real thing. Some of these things are dipped in chocolate. That's when it's a problem, right? You're not going to find things that are the low-calorie things. So, but you can do, with like a fruited popsicle or something, looking for the ones that are, like you said, mostly fruit as a key ingredient. And but again, one of the things I like about these is one thing, right? I mean, you're not eating, you can control your portion better that way. So sometimes that works really well for people. And, and you can, there's all kinds of recipes. Parents can help kids make some of these things at home, right?
Exactly. Just buy those molds, those popsicle molds, and you can put whatever fruit and liquid that you want in it. So
DIY, do it yourself. Those work really well. Well, we want you to stay cool during the hot temperature months ahead, and I hope that these tips were helpful for you. Pay attention to those nutrition facts labels. There's a lot of information on there, and they're for you. Thank you for tuning in to CTN 10, and I want to thank you, Jerica, for being here today with us. Look forward to seeing you here next week.